Lesson 24, day 1 is on interpreting graphs. We're going to talk about a transformation. Transformation is simply a change in the size of the position of the graph. All the points can slide in one direction, flip in one direction, and those slides and flips are called translation. A translation is the slide where all the points move in the same direction, same amount of spaces. A reflection is a transformation involving a flip. It can be a flip over the x-axis or your y-axis. Or it could be simply over a line, such as the line of symmetry, but it's basically a mirror image of the graph is formed. Maximum it is what it is. It's the highest point on the graph. Minimum is the lowest point on the graph. Some graphs may not have a maximum or a minimum. Zeros of a function are independent, where the independent variable makes the dependent variable zero. Simply, this is the x-intercept of a graph. It's where it crosses that horizontal axis. So first example, they want us to state the maximum and minimum of the given function. This function that we are dealing with is an absolute value function. That parent function is a V-shaped graph. Now x is inside the absolute value. We see that it is negative, therefore that V shape is curved down. We need to state the max and the min. Remember, the max would be the highest point on the graph. The highest point on the graph is right here. This point right here, which is 3. So it has a maximum. However, this graph does not have a minimum because this graph continues on forever in that direction. So the minimum we are going to write as none. Estimating the zeros. Remember, the zeros are simply the x-intercepts. This crosses my x-axis in 2 spots. There's 1, there's 2. This is simply an estimate. So you're going to estimate. This looks like it's going to be -4 and 2. Increase and decrease is how the graph increases or decreases, and I always start from left to right. So like I read a book, I read along the line. This graph right here increases. All those x values, these x values are from -infinity, because the graph goes on forever. So all these are negative values over here. So -infinity up to a specific point. That specific point is going to be -1. So the graph increases from -infinity to -1. If I used any of those values for x, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, etc., -infinity, any of those negative numbers, the y is going to increase because it is on the rise. Next, my decrease of the graph. Well, my decrease is going to go from -1 to, well, this goes on forever in this direction, positive infinity. So my increase and decrease are labeled as such. Next graph we have is a cubic function. It's a cubic function because the highest value is cubed for x. So it creates the graph of a cubic function. We need to state our maximum and our minimum. Remember, the highest point and the lowest point. Well, in a cubic function, this graph goes on forever down and up. So it doesn't have a highest point and a lowest point because it goes on forever. So we are going to state that the max and min are going to be none. Zeros, remember, zeros is simply my x-intercepts. This one actually intersects the graph in 3 spots. Right in here. Notice that is slightly above -4, so I don't want to say it's -4. I'm going to say it's about -3.7, and again, it's an estimate. Looks like it intersects right in there, which is about -2, and my last one is slightly below 1, so I'm going to go ahead and say that it intersects at 0.8. Those are my 3 zeros, or my x-intercepts. Next, I'll deal with my increase and my decrease. Again, for reading it from left to right, the graph is on the rise. So my increase is going to be from -infinity, any value I use there, and it increases to a specific point. That specific point is right there. which is going to be -3. So anywhere from negative infinity to -3, my graph is on the increase. Now, from -3 down to this particular point, that is going to be covering a decrease. So my decrease is going to be from -3 to slightly below 0. I'm going to say it is going to be -0.4. So that's going to cover the decrease portion of the graph. Now we still have a little bit left, so we go from our -0.4 and the graph goes back on the increase. So I'm going to say that my increase is going to be from -0.4 to, well, it goes on forever in that direction, so it's going to hit the rest of the x values, which would be all the way up until positive infinity. This will conclude lesson 24, day 1.